Now we are on to paper 2, which is calculator active, and we are in section 1, and then section 2 will be a separate video. Okay, so we're on number 1. So here we go. It says a particle P moves in a straight line for 5 seconds, and its acceleration is given, by that function. In part A, it says to write the values of T1 and T2 when A is 0. So I personally, when I did this, I didn't use my calculator, and I should have. But either way, so in part A, you could have not used your calculator. That would have been fine. Or you could have drawn this graph and calculated that T1 was 2/3 and T2 was 4 by setting my 3t squared minus 14t plus 8 equal to 0. And when you factor that, it ends up factoring out perfectly. But you don't need to do that. You can just sub it in your calculator if that's what they really wanted you to do, and just find the zeros. So that's that for part A, and you would have gotten +1 for each of those answers. It was only 2 marks. +1 answer. Or sometimes they'll give 1 point for both of the answers, and then 1 point for showing that you set this equal to 0 or solve for these roots or something like that. So just don't forget to show your work, even though I didn't count it as a point for this one. Okay, so now part B. So this one says find an expression for the velocity of P at time t. It gives you information. It tells you that initial velocity is 3. So at time t0, velocity is 3. So in order to find velocity from acceleration, we have to integrate. So you should have integrated 3t squared minus 14t plus 8 dt. And you should have gotten t cubed minus 7t squared plus 8t plus c. And this algebra just has to happen. You can't really solve for c on your calculator. So we should have gotten that 3 was equal to this goes to 0, this goes to 0, this goes to 0. So it's just equal to c. So that's really nice. Okay. So actually, where is my whiteout? I put my whiteout down in the worst places. So 3 was 0 plus c, which ends up giving me that c is 3. Okay. And what was, oh my gosh, this is so hideous. This whiteout, this brand that I'm using, I don't really like as much as the old one. It slants almost. Oh my gosh. And then so your final answer, V of t is t cubed minus 7t squared plus 8t plus 3. Okay. And you would get +1 for your answer. This was a total of 6 marks. +3 for integrating this correctly and getting the correct answer. +1 for this method. And that should give you +1 for the method of setting it up, putting it in the integral, and then that gives you 3, 4, 5, 6 points total. Okay. And then part C is the last thing, find the total distance traveled. So in order to find the total distance traveled, this means we have to use absolute value, because we want to include, I could start here, go to the opposite side of the room, come back, and do that 4 or 5 times. And my total distance traveled is very different than my displacement, which would end up being 0 if I started and ended at the same place. So in order to do this, I take my limits that I found in part A, 2/3 and 4, and I put absolute value marks around my velocity function that I found in part B. So t cubed minus 7t squared plus 8t plus 3. And this is calculator active. So don't even go to the effort of figuring out where your function crosses the x-axis. Just sub it in, use the math number absolute value function, type in x cubed minus 7x squared plus 8x plus 3. Graph it. They'll give you the absolute value of your graph. You can see where like this should have been down here or whatever. Then click calculate, go down to intersect. My lower limit, oh no, not intersect. So graph, calculate, integral. Then my lower limit is 2 divided by 3. My upper limit is 4. And it'll integrate that for you and give you your total displacement of 20.99 meters. Okay, so for this one, you would get plus 1 point for bounds, plus 1 point for doing the absolute value of the function, plus 1 point for integrating your v of t, and plus 1 point for your answer. Okay, and that's all 4 of those points. Okay, let's do number 2. Gemma's waking up, losing time. Okay, so my calculator almost fell. So in number 2, let me find it. So this one should be a particle moves along a straight line with velocity, blah, 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 blah. And it has 3 parts. Okay, so we have find the particle's initial velocity. Initial velocity is when t is equal to 0. So I just sub in v of 0. So I should have 10 times negative 1 e to the 0. So I should get negative 10 meters per second, or meters times second to the negative first power. And part A, 3 marks. So plus 1 for subbing in 0. That's your method. I guess plus 1 for this work, plus 1 for your answer. And that has to include units. If you did not include units, you can give yourself a half a point if you got negative 10. Okay, part B says find the total distance traveled. Again, total distance, we're using absolute value. And it says for the first 3 seconds, so we're integrating from 0 to 3, t minus 1 e to the negative 1.7 t dt. And when you integrate this on your calculator, I guess I'll do it. I'm running out of time though. She's waking up. 10x minus 1. My husband has been working night shift, so this has been just like the most fun. Negative 1.7 x, and delete everything. Why did I decide that I needed to put all this in? And I didn't really need it. Why?